Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 130 of the Podcana podcast. This week, we're going to be taking a look at the top 10 best decks that you should be playing within Disney Lorcana. These decks are taken from across multiple tournaments that took place this weekend, as well as the LCCC event that we are all participating in. Some events to note that are coming up very, very soon. We have DLC Singapore that Thiago will be attending. Very, very excited to hopefully watch some coverage of that event. I will be attending a CCQ this weekend in Wakefield in the UK, so I'm excited to kind of start competing again. This will be my first major event within Set 10, so looking forward to that. And in the meantime, we've had the LCCC taking place. It's been really, really fun. I had a match versus Sky, so that was quite interesting. If you guys happen to watch it, I will say I think Sky got very unfortunate, like very, very unlucky. And I was just...
bro, you're just too good. You're way too
Bro,
good.
bro. No. I played terribly. I watched back my games. I looked at what the mistakes I made, and I played very badly. But that's stuff I would encourage anybody to do, right? It's like, see where you went wrong, try to learn from your mistakes. I know even, Sky, you said that you felt like you didn't play perfectly either, right? Like, you made a couple of mistakes too.
No, yeah, for sure. There was definitely some mistakes I made. I don't think you played that bad, though. I think there was one thing that I noticed, obviously, without seeing the hand, it's tough to know, but it seemed like you were making the right plays for sure. I just missed Cindy a bunch, and that's not good when you hit Cindy. So.
Nah, bro, you played 4 visions and didn't see any top end at all, which is just bananas.
Yeah, I saw one Vincenzo and like 30 cards. It's like, where's the Hades? Where's the Horseman? But
yeah.
It happens.
Yeah, I want to pass it over to you, Zach. Tell us a little bit about your game, because you had a very special match versus Baker, right? How was that?
Yeah, so Baker, one of my best friends in Lorcana for sure. Yeah, it was an interesting match. I was playing purple still, of course. He was playing red purple, as everyone knew he would. And I won game 1, and then games 2 and 3 just did not go my way. So ended up losing to Baker, which is pretty cool. Happy to even see him playing this time. It's pretty awesome. So yeah.
For sure, yeah, and I'm just happy we got a couple of wins in for EU. I was the first person to try and get some. NA was dominating. I'm not gonna lie, speaking to Thiago, this guy would love talking some smack. He's like, these EU players, my God, man, it's just free, man. World champion. What do you mean? It's just, But yeah, Thiago, tell us a little bit about your game versus DKP.
Yeah, so my game against DKP, I had like a super favored matchup. I submitted green purple Brainiac, and he submitted just normal blue steel, which is like one of the reasons why I decided to bring this deck. I think it is going to be super strong into a lot of the decks that people in this tournament are going to skew towards, like these much more slow strategies that lets me really take advantage of the Amethyst Chromacon without really punishing me. So the games kind of went as planned. Like in a couple of the games, I got Webby Shift, and it just like completely took over the game. In game 2, he was able to use his Headless Horseman and Beyond the Horizon to discard 5 of my Prince Philip combo pieces. So he like was able to break me down enough to take the second game, but then the third game I just shifted Webby, and he was never really in the game. So yeah, just super cool that we're all able to be a part of this tournament, and it's just like such a cool thing for the community to see all these different players and personalities competing against each other with like pretty regular frequency.
Definitely, yeah. Huge shout out to Pavel once again for putting on this awesome show. Shout out to Phil, the judges, the casters. Like, it's such a communal thing, and it's like a really awesome thing to be a part of. But let's move into talking about some of the top 10 decks. But before we do, once again, we have the PPG Orlando Summit coming up on December 12th to 14th, featuring many different TCGs. They will be having a 5K on the Friday, a 10K, which is like the main event, on the Saturday, and they're going to be having a 5K Infinity Tournament on the 14th. If you guys are interested in attending this event and you also want to support the podcast, be sure to secure your ticket down below in the video description. There is also another message I wanted to mention, which is Heavy Play. Heavy Play is a brand that myself, Brendan, and Moyne worked with many moons ago, and I've recently learned that many people are still using our code, which is awesome. I've used a lot of their products. I think that their magnetic deck boxes are like particularly cool. Obviously, the thing they're probably known for the most is their curved sleeves, which is also like a super super unique thing, which I think for a lot of players in Lorcana is actually quite cool. I think when you like put down your ink and then you're trying to shuffle your deck for maybe some like newer players, a lot of cards can end up upside down and stuff. So honestly, the quality of them as well, I have to say, like this is my genuine honest opinion. Initially, when I used the product, the quality was not as good as I would have liked. A couple of the sleeves like were splitting and stuff like that, but they've definitely improved over time. And since I've used them like lately, I've had like absolutely no issues, and I think their deck boxes and everything are like super 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 high quality. So shout out to Heavy Play. They are partnered with us. We've continued to be partnered with them this whole time. So if you guys are interested in checking out their deck boxes or sleeves, be sure to use code Podcana at checkout for 10% off, or also click the link down below in the video description. One other piece of news before we get into the decks, but this one is kind of exciting. I talked to you guys that I had a new job, and I was really eager to talk about it. I still can't talk about it too much, but what I can say is I am now the community and content manager for Cyberpunk TCG, which is a bit crazy. It's like a crazy brand IP to have on a card game to work with. Everything's in super interesting stages at the moment. I really can't get into anything too much, but what I can say is I am working on this game, and it's something that is just really awesome for me. Like, I've been working at Card Market for the past while. It's been awesome, but now this is my first step into the TCG publisher side of things, right? Like working on like the real business side of actually making a TCG. I'm not gonna lie, I've seen some people ask questions of what does this mean for me and Lorcana. What I can say now is it doesn't mean anything. I love Lorcana, I love this podcast, I love competing, I love casting. We will see what happens in the future. Like I think we might run into some problems a little bit down the line, but for the moment, at the end of the day, I should still be able to do the podcast. I should still be able to compete. And this is just a direction in my personal career path that I'm really excited for. And I think it's going to, push me in a certain direction that will lead me to many other great opportunities as well. But yes, enough of the news. Let's get straight into this. We've got a Ruby Amethyst deck taking down the latest CCQ in Las Vegas. Zach, I'm going to start off with you if that's okay, because you played against Baker playing a red-purple deck. And I know we talked about a couple of different versions originally. I think Baker, like very early, was testing like Maleficent Dragons, wanted a bit of like top end to try and deal with these big, heavy, greedy Sapphire decks. And Thiago, I do know that you've also been testing a lot of red-purple during your spare time. But yeah, I want to pass this over to you, Zach. Like, before we dive into this deck specifically, what's your general thoughts on Ruby Amethyst within this meta?
I think the deck's great. It has a lot of stuff going for it. It's got the broken purple stuff, so it has that going for it. And then it's like a more aggressively slanted purple steel kind of, because you have the Diablos and the Sisus, and then you have the Headless Horseman, which is fantastic. I think it's very good, very strong. Wouldn't even be surprised if it's like one of the top few decks at all. I haven't tested it myself, but yeah, definitely on the things I'm going to get to, and I think it's extremely strong.
I've seen all of the memes come out of, I don't know if you guys know the meme of like T'Challa, like the Black Panther. As you can see, I am not dead, because, last set I will say is probably the one set where red-purple was definitely at its weakest, but I do feel like that meme is very appropriate where all of the Ruby Amethyst players are like, oh, our deck's dead this set, we've got absolutely no shot, and somehow it always seems to come back out. Not always on top, but most of the time it's a very decent deck within the meta. So, I think the way you described it there, Zach, is definitely correct. It is very much a just curved out deck, but I agree that the addition of this Diablo alongside you've got the Sisu, and you've also got basically the Peter Pan, like similar to Minnie Mouse Surfer, just super good statted cards that have a little bit more of an aggressive stat line just in terms of that extra lore pip, right? So being able to quest for 2, having a couple more of these characters that can quest for 2, paired alongside like the likes of Iago is a card. I think you mentioned Thiago. Like very few people are playing around or like actually including cards in their decks that can specifically tackle the Iago. Let's say in like, I don't know, Amethyst mirrors, like there's very little what's the card? Hypnotic strengths, right, to potentially deal with the Iagos and stuff. But yeah, I'm gonna pass this over to you, Thiago, now, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on 2 specific cards within this deck. One being the meme legendary Hercules, which is I think is a card that people were like really pooping on originally. And we can see 1 copy in this deck. And then also I'd love for you to maybe speak a little bit about this 5-cost Ursula, because I think this is a particularly interesting card too.
Yeah, I think the Hercules is a card that a lot of people have been trying out in this deck. It it can be super powerful, especially when you're curving it on turn 4 into Elsa on turn 5, who is also a hero herself, but really giving you the opportunity to give your Hercules a very valuable attack on his first challenge the first time he exerts, because when he exerts, he really opens himself up to pretty efficient answers from the opponent, be it the Tinkerbell or Rafiki or Captain Hook or Calhoun. So you really want him to be able to get value before he's challenged into, and typically you need something like Elsa to set that up. But your deck also plays Demona. It's not like the only kind of way to activate it. I think the card is like reasonable. My problem with the card is that it's an uninkable card that is good in specific matchups, but is not the most flexible card, and it's at the same ink cost that you have other uninkable cards. And so I really think that this red-purple deck is built around, of course, these like aggressively statted characters like the Red Diablo and Sisu and Genie, but really what I think the deck revolves around is Demona, and I think that the reason why we see this color combination really showing out in this set is because it's the color combination that best utilizes Demona, and I think that that's partially because it has access to the Headless Horseman, whereas in a deck like Purple Steel, the way that your deck really creates these big tempo advantages is by utilizing Strength of Raging Fire, whereas so then you're able to use Strength of Raging Fire and develop a character on the same turn and build your advantage that way on board. Whereas Red Purple does it with just playing Headless Horseman. That is both the removal effect and the body developing for all of your ink that turn. And so when you do it with just a single Headless Horseman, then it's only costing a single card out of your hand. Whereas in Purple Steel, developing a character and singing Strength of Raging Fire costs 2 cards. So your hand size is more taxed, and you're not as able to ink 6 times and cast characters throughout the first 5 turns of the games to curve you into your Demona very well. And so when you're playing a lot of these uninkable cards like the Hercules, it kind of eats away at the flexibility that you have to perfectly curve 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 while being able to top it off with a Demona with an empty hand or close to empty hand. And so considering that you have both Genies and Headless Horsemans that cost 4 and 5 at the very top end of your curve before your Demona, I think it can be generally pretty hard to fit a card like this in. And the Ursula, the Whisper of Vanessa, is a card that I've been trying out a little bit in Purple Steel. I think a lot of these like Tempo-y Purple Shells are struggling a bit with like some of the Blue Steel decks, particularly when the Blue Steel decks is really game planning around playing against the Red Purple deck. So I think we're kind of seeing cards like this trying to find their way in. It very notably has 5 health, right, which means it survives against the Zeus Thunderbolt and some of the common removal effects that people are playing. It's also one of the reasons why like the 6-cost Max Goof is seeing play in green-blue. It's just like a very awkward stat line to deal with, and then she can very easily take over the game, right? Being able to quest for 3 evasive. Like we've known that these decks have historically not had the easiest time dealing with like a couple of Genies or something like that. So I think it's mostly just another way to attack those. Of course, all of those decks have Hades, but it's just another threat, and when you're chaining all these Dumbos and Genies and Iagos, it's just another thing that taxes their removal. So yeah, it's a card that I'm gonna have to play a bit more with, but I'm definitely interested to use it to attack some of these slower decks.
Yeah, I think a lot of these characters that have 5 willpower often require very specific answers. Like I will say, like during my match and Sky's match during LCCC, like obviously it was a mirror match, and there's a lot of characters that have 5 willpower, right? And like I think we both did this to each other where we exactly had like Tinkerbell and Sing Thunderbolt, and that was like the perfect way to deal with it. But it's like 2 very specific cards that you need to answer that like 5 willpower breakpoint. So like the difference between 4 and 5 within this game right now is absolutely huge. But yeah, I think Demona also just like rounds this deck off really, really, really nicely. I think you might have mentioned this in a previous episode, but for some folks wondering why a card like the Library is included in here, it's pretty good at being able to help out against, for example, green-blue. If you're expecting the Prince Philip combo, you might have the opportunity to move a lot of your characters into the Library, and then once the Prince Philip combo comes down, yes, all of your characters get removed, but they're going to basically replace themselves because you can just trigger the Library. And we've got, like, you know, one of David Xanatos in here, which is quite interesting, and also they never come back as well, which is quite cool to see. But yeah, red purple is still very much a deck, and this is something you mentioned, Thiago, where, like, you know, I think the last time we showed off a tier list on the podcast, we had it in kind of a tier 3, which was like potential decks that people just aren't playing enough and aren't really, you know, willing to put in the work and discover. And yeah, I think red purple is in a very, very decent spot right now. So continuing on our discussion, I will take a look at the second place deck just to see, you know, any differences within this specific build. And one thing that will immediately catch people's eye is they've got Hades in here, 3 copies of the Hades looking for a deal, 2 copies of Magical Maneuvers as well, which in my mind acts as 2 things. It helps out as extended disruption against your opponent, but honestly, I could be wrong. I'd love to hear your guys' opinion, but it's probably also pretty good with something like maybe the 2-cost Diablo as well, where like you can basically just ready a character, right? Like you can kind of quest, like it will help you kind of put on the pressure again if you're able to replay. But of course, it's like, yeah, I could like bounce the Hades back, get more cards, bounce an Elsa back, bounce a Genie back, bounce a, like there's a lot of cards in this deck that have pretty okay on play effects. So you got the flexibility of like, okay, maybe if I want to just like bounce a card back to my hand to replay it to protect it, or bounce a card back to my hand to actually get an advantage of replaying the on playability, and also just disrupting your opponent by exerting one of their characters. So yeah, Sky, maybe I'll pass this to you to see, like, you know, what do you think of this build versus the first one?
Sure, yeah, I think this build is maybe a little bit more of what I tested this week. I was definitely trying out the Hades. You know, in Purple Steel, Hades was such a strong like card draw card that the deck got, that it felt right to want to play that in a deck that kind of traditionally was lacking the card draw that it maybe once had. Turns out it wasn't that great. I didn't try the Ursula that the last list played, but I think that card fits much better in what this deck wants to do. You play a ton of 4-drop, so if you go 4-drop into, you know, the next turn play that card and boost, or on 4 play it and then boost the next turn, play a different 4-drop, that seems fantastic. You don't really need the card draw from this Hades, and you don't have like songs that the Hades can sing, so he's much less like powerful or potent or scary in this deck than in like Purple Steel. That's mainly because you also have Demona. You're typically setting up for like Demona board states to where you're trying to potentially draw all 3 cards. Like I said, this deck doesn't have songs, so like trying to burn through multiple, you know, double spells, it can be tough. Sometimes you can fit like a 5-cost and a 1-cost the turn before, and then just ink the following turn to play Demona to get the full draw 3. But it really seems like the turn before you like don't really want the 2 cards from Hades, because then you turn off the Demona. You wanted to exert things anyways, so maybe you might even just play Demona and draw 1 or none because the efficient trades that you have on board, especially going first. But yeah, I think the deck seems crazy. Like this week I played a bunch of it because I was playing this very fun Amber Steel mid-range that I was doing very well. I was like started off like 8-1 or 10-1 with it. I was like, all right, this deck might be legit. But I couldn't beat this deck. I started running into this deck and it was just destroying me. And it's a bad matchup. Like Headless Horseman taking out like the Mickey Mouse Amber champion feels really bad. And then they just get crazy efficient trades with their whole board because everything is buffed. But this deck just got so much. Like if you look at the past, like the 2-drop slot of what Red Purple had, it was pretty weak. You had Lumiere always, but it wasn't particularly well statted in the meta. Obviously, two health and two strength were super weak in the pre-rotation meta with Sisu and Storm and stuff like that. But now he's a powerhouse. He buffs up everything and it makes it much scarier. And then Diablo is just insane. Like having two lore on a 2-drop is crazy. It doesn't matter that it's uninkable. Like there's so many times where it's like the one thing that you fit a double spell on with because it's so efficient. And then the 1-drops are very good. Like Tinkerbell 3-1 is fairly good. If Lumiere is buffing it, it's a pretty big threat. Palace Guard, same thing. It's just a good statted thing, and Lumiere can buff it as well. And then yeah, you got the draw with Demona. Like Demona does everything this deck wants to do. You just curve out and play a Demona, turn things sideways, get really efficient trades, and as well as refilling your hand is crazy. One thing I'm interested in is like seeing the library. I wasn't trying library. I don't necessarily think it's that great. There are some games where like going first, it felt like you could, play like an early library, and it's just really, really like, what do I do against this? But I think it's kind of a liability. I think most of your characters in this format are pretty safe on board. Like just going wide is perfectly fine. You're typically not going to run out of cards with this deck. I mean, Genie and Demona is just so many cards, and Dumbo, that it's really hard to kind of like run out of cards in this deck. Like even if you're for one turn just playing like a big guy and not drawing a card, you're eventually going to get something that draws cards. So I don't know. I think it's interesting. The magical maneuvers is interesting as well. That was one card that I thought might be pretty good in this deck, but I didn't get too much value out of it when I played it.
Does also interact kind of nicely with the. I mean, it's very niche interaction, but if you do have a boosted Cheshire Cat, you can bounce that back, and you're basically getting a card, right? So that's one thing to note, that if you do have any sort of boost cards in your deck, and if you can return them back to your hand, you're basically going to be gaining a card and potentially multiple cards if you want to boost something multiple times. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different ways you can still take Ruby Amethyst. Yeah, I think that's a good point you mentioned, Sky. Like maybe there are other cards you could play in place of the library, potentially. As you mentioned, Thiago, maybe there's even other options besides this Hercules. We can see this player is on 3 at the moment. Do you think, even with like 4 Iago running around now, that, I mean, like that's what could be in place for libraries, right? Like maybe you need to put like some Iago tech. I mean, or do you think Iago is even that much of a problem that you have to play some sort of answer? I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Thiago.
Yeah, I think decks should certainly be playing some amount of answers. I think it's like crazy that people were all playing like 4 hypnotic strengths and a magical maneuvers in like Blurple last set, and then in this set everyone just instantly jumped to 0. It's like either we're playing way too many last set or we're playing way too few now, because like the difference in the amount of illusions being played is not that drastic, where things are like so wildly swinging. But I think the library is a decent card if the meta is consisting of a lot of these big green strategies. I think like just having a proactive card that you can develop like going into the turns where they need to have Prince Philip combo to clear your board is like a nice tool to have access to. I think that these green strategies just have not seemed to be doing super well in a lot of the tournaments that we've been having. I think the purple strategies just have been really, really dominating, and I think that you kind of need to adjust your deck in a way to be able to compete in that kind of meta, and that involves cards like Iago. So I think that we're ultimately gonna see something like this library get trimmed, but I think having a couple copies of a card that like specifically in a matchup where you can struggle at times, being able to like deploy something before your opponent is able to complete their combo while they're setting up for it, when they don't have super efficient ways to deal with the library itself, is a strong way to attack those decks.
Yeah, the one final thing I'll say is it's even interesting the differences between the first place list and the second place list. For like they opted to include the 3-cost evasive card, right? The Peter Pan that has 2 lore and even one of like Timothy Q Mouse. So again, those cards we've seen already kind of in Purple Steel. Basically, it was the 3-cost Tinkerbell, really trying to push that early game aggressive strategy. But I think it kind of makes sense to try stray away, especially if there's so much. I feel like if there's so much Purple Steel, that the 3-cost cards just get answered by like Lexingtons and lots of other stuff. And even in the mirror, like it's a bit weird, because like if you just have like a Lumiere and a Genie, then it just like takes out the card pretty easily. So I mean, there's like lots of considerations to make. I think the final thing I'd like to ask is, how do you guys feel red purple is positioned against something like Amethyst Steel, for example. Like, I actually haven't checked a lot of people's runs or scores in the weekend, right? Like, I'd be curious to check up like what were their matchups? Did they feel kind of pretty good into purple steel? Because I think when people see kind of a cool new deck, and I would say this week is the first time we saw red purple perform extremely well. So a lot of people are going to be having their eye on this deck. You know, we said they can kind of do okay against you know, some of the greedier decks, but against something like Amethyst Steel, is there anything that you guys would look for in particular to see, like, you know, what type of advantage I can get against it, or what cards, like I said, I shouldn't play, because like maybe going something like going deeper into the Peter Pans is not really the strategy you want to go if you expect a lot of purple steel. Maybe I'll pass it to you, Zach, for your initial thoughts here.
Yeah. So a lot of people seem to think that red purple just really does super well into Amethyst Steel. And I think it can, but I think a lot of it comes down to the purple steel build, because all of these purple steel builds are playing Timothy Q Mouse and Tinkerbell and like 4 dogs, and I don't think they've adapted to set 10 at all. They have no Iago answers besides the normal things that are answering the other stuff. Like, they don't have the extra Iago answers that they need. They're not playing Iago themselves. So I think the early success of red purple into Amethyst Steel is a result of Amethyst Steel players being behind on their deck list, in my opinion. And I think once you get a better Amethyst Steel build within the set 10 frame, now it's a much closer matchup and can come down to play draw and things like that. And Amethyst Steel decks aren't even playing high demonic counts like I feel like they should be. So yeah, I think it's, like I said, it's a result of Amethyst Steel players lacking behind. And once the list catch up, it's going to be a pretty even matchup, I think.
It's a really good point. Yeah, Thiago, would you agree with that?
Yeah, entirely. I think that the matchup's super, super close. I think the big difference in the matchups, one player has Horseman and one player has Strength of Raging Fire. So if the purple steel player has a lot more of these tools to play on turn 4 that aren't their genie curving into the enemy's Headless Horseman, like if they have their own Iagos, for example, then the red purple player is in a much bigger bind if you're able to develop one of these other cards on turn 4 as opposed to something that perfectly curves into him. I think a lot of people are really struggling to set up their combat on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th turns of the games to minimize the opponent's Demona coming down on the 6th turn, which is something that the red-purple deck as the premier Demona deck is most able to take advantage of. And I think that if in my opinion, the purple steel deck is slightly ahead, but I think that like the die roll plays a major factor in this matchup. Both of these players who finished first and second were the 1 and 2 seeds, so they were on the play the entire time in their top cut runs, and then in the finals, the 1 seed beat the 2 seed. So I think this deck does not always have the best tools to fight back from behind and are really contingent on their overstated characters really clogging up the board and bridging them into this part of the game where they are able to make this really big Demona swing, which should not be happening that frequently when they go second.
Sure. No, I think that's some fantastic insight into red purple. We're going to move on and take a look at a top 4 deck from the same event, the Vegas CCQ. And not only, like, you know, we'd probably talk about this deck anyways because it's a top 4 finish, but there's something very special in here. Sky, I'd love to pass this over to you. Do you know what we're talking about when we say there's a special card in this deck?
Yeah. The Della, I don't even know the card name of the card. Della's Moon Lullaby.
Yeah.
Just give something -2 and draw a card. It was the reveal card that we had. Yeah, the card is, I mean, it's good. Like, Under the Sea hits enough stuff right now that, like, if you just draw a card while sweeping up one extra thing with it, it's like actually pretty good. I don't know what else you'd fit in this slot. You'd probably, like, you already have enough characters, so like you might as well just threaten something like that. Yeah, I don't know. This one, I'm not super sold on dogs this set. There's like the Circle of Dogs thing, which can be pretty strong if it pops off like super early. You get a Clarabelle out early. And then there's like this more aggressive like Chromacon version that still plays stuff like Under the Sea. I don't know. I mean, it's just dogs. Like,
yes, just
dogs,
right?
it can do strong stuff. Like Tramp is a messed up card for sure. You can't really interact enough to stop Tramp in this format. There's stuff like Mowgli now that can take Chromacons and Under the Sea, but nobody's playing it other than this deck, so like that stuff is still all safe. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if this version is going to play out better than the other versions, but it looks solid.
How do we feel something like red purple does into dogs? That's an interesting question.
I
I
think
think it probably beats it pretty bad.
it completely dominates it. Like is like not even remotely close to close matchup. It's like so disgusting. I think dogs is literally like -5% to win that matchup. It's like all of the reasons why purple steel is insane against you, plus like now you have headless horsemen that can't get Ursula away like the purple steel strength of Raging Fire. Like that matchup is so not close. Like it's really, really disgusting.
You've like no answer to when they actually establish the board. And first of all, like sure the game plan with this is maybe I can get the early tramp and then sing it Under the Sea to get rid of their board. Like I've experienced this as a green blue player versus like somehow I ran into 2 red purples in Milwaukee, right? And 2 of the games I did lose because they just had Lumiere, which completely shut off my like Under the Sea plan. So like think about all the cards that are Under the Sea in that deck. There's actually
Yeah,
not
you
that
said-
many anyways, but like even with Lumiere, the ones that are Under the Sea will just get, turned off. So it's kind of crazy.
Yeah,
you
the
should
deck has like
probably-
no interaction. See, there's no way to get rid of it.
Yep.
Like, once one's down, it's like done.
Yeah, then when 2
Yeah,
come
you
down,
should
you're like,
probably-
yeah, have a good day.
I think the genies are probably something you should avoid anyways in that matchup. You should probably like be aiming to play your cards that just can never get under the seat anyways. But if you do have the Lumiere established, then yeah, you can develop some of these cards. But I think generally you should try to have those be the last cards in your hand that you ever develop.
Sure, yeah. All right, let's move on to the next deck, which is a very, very cool one. It is a Ruby Sapphire deck that managed to get top 16 at the Vegas CCQ. And if I'm not mistaken, I think we talked about a specific build like this last week. But it wasn't a specific build like this. We talked about a Ruby Sapphire deck, and we mentioned some of the things that are actually in here. Like I mentioned, Might Solve a Mystery could be good if you've got like the appropriate amount of items. I liked the idea of Mushu's Rocket. I mean, we saw Medallion Weights already. I kind of like that. We talked about Sudden Scare in something like Blue Steel, which Thiago, you weren't a fan of, but maybe in this deck it's a little bit different. And yeah, I mean, we've already seen like this Cinderella and Akita strat in some of the other blue decks. So a very interesting one to break down here. And honestly, like I just think it's cool to see a red blue do so well in like a pretty big event. Like, I think we know why red blue has gotten a lot worse is because it really has lacked a lot of card draw. Like it has a lot of interactability, which is great, but it's just truly missed the Hiram package of being able to play like popsicles and Hiram and like really keep your engine going. But that's something we talked about, like, Might Solve a Mystery, and I mean, like Cinderella helps with like a bit of filtering. You can play Ink Geyser, which is like a little bit of a worse popsicle, but this sort of build to me makes sense as to why, like, I can see why this deck works because it has a lot of the elements that I feel like we're missing, even if they come at a little bit of a higher cost than what you're kind of used to. And of course, it's actually notable that you've got the 3-cost Sisu in here, which when paired alongside with the Sapphire Coil is just like extended interactability. Like there's like way more targets available for this card. So I will pass this to Sky. What are your impressions? Because I'd say, like, it's a very different deck to Blue Steel, but it's still very ramp focused, right? Which is something you're a big fan of. So what's your and what were your initial impressions when you saw this deck?
It's definitely interesting. The first thing I did was count the items, and there's only 12, so being really heavily reliant on the Might Solve a Mystery is a little sketchy with 12. You're probably going to miss like a decent amount of the time on the item. But it looks cool. I also don't know why they chose to go with 3 Cindy with only 8 2-drop ramp options. That seems kind of interesting to play something like 4 Sisu over a 4th Cindy 3 Sisu split. Because you have 4 Headless Horsemen also. That's like the main single target move you're trying to combo with the Sapphire Coil. This deck seems, I mean, it's good. Like it's the deck that has the most single target removal because you have the 4 of Maleficent Dragon on top of the Hades, and like Headless Horseman kind of becomes just any single target removal in this deck. But I don't think the card draw engine is quite there. I think this is a deck that you're gonna play your Cindy. It's gonna net you like 1 extra card. You don't really have good princesses that you can play that are fast enough to keep up in tempo. Like Kita's just way too slow to play. and like rely on that extra card there. So like the turn after is kind of where like you have like one awkward turn before you start doing your heavy hitters, and a deck like Blue Steel is just going to do like your heavy hitters in that slot much better than this deck will. I mean, yeah, you can play like Shark, but like if it gets removed, then you're just doing nothing, and like going into single target removal after that's like typically not good enough. I think the deck has legs, but I don't see it being better than Blue Steel.
Sure, I think this deck, in theory, at least looking at it, would still probably struggle against a lot of these purple decks that are just running like good evasive cards, right? Like, yes, you've got Sisu and Horseman that like can interact with them, but it's not always gonna happen, right? I think just because we say we've got like Horseman and Sisu isn't like, oh, I've got like perfect answers for the evasive cards. Like, they'll play enough genies and enough, if they're still playing these 3-cost evasive cards, they're just gonna keep putting on the pressure. That's gonna be difficult for you to consistently get over. Like, yes, you have Shark in this specific build, but again, when Shark comes down, the opponent can play around it in a certain way. But I don't know. Like, I think I kind of agree with you, Sky. I think there might be something here. I don't know if it's gonna be like I really don't think this is gonna be a top tier deck at all. But like I said, go ahead.
Like going Cindy and the Shark is fine, but if you just look at Blue Steel, like okay, Blue Steel's playing a 5 or 6 cost character. You have plenty of options to have it be a princess, and that just in a way draws you 2 cards, right? You're always going to want to ink to beyond 6 ink, and you're always going to want to draw a card, obviously. So like having this deck's option of like its preferred 6 cost is something that doesn't do those 2 things and does nothing on like entering the battlefield. Like if they remove the Shark, you just lose so much value compared to Blue Steel playing like a Namari to follow up a Cindy or an Ariel. Like both those cards are just so much more impactful immediately than the Shark is. And yeah, I mean, like, yeah, Shark can live and threaten stuff, but they can also just not quest for a little bit until they start getting their single target removal.
Exactly. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thiago, Zach, do you guys have any final comments on the deck before we move on?
Yeah, I just think that this deck would it's a very interesting idea to use the Might Solve a Mystery to kind of solve some of the like card draw problems that some of these decks in this color combination have typically had. I just don't think you get enough out of these specific items and the items we have available to us. I also just don't see it. Like if somebody's just curving like 2-drop Diablo into 3-drop Sisu, like how this deck ever deals with like stuff like that when everything's like trying to be single target removal, if they just have these like slightly resilient threats that are just like not getting Horseman, and then like your first answer is like turn 7 Hades or something, or like turn 5 Hades or whatever. Like it just, I don't think it is really has the kind of suite of cards to deal with some of these like repeated lore gaining threats, like just cheap 2-questers.
Yeah, this deck's just way too slow. You're always answering things like a turn behind, basically. You don't have the board wipe, so yeah, I don't think it has what it takes right now.
Sure. Yeah, great comments all around. All right, let's move on to the first place list from, I have this label as a 114 player tournament. I believe this was an event that took place in France. And yeah, Blurple is still a pretty good deck. It's just a good deck. We're seeing I honestly kind of like this build. It has a lot of different elements, the one of Spooky. It has still like 2 Tamato, which people were like bringing in and out. But in general, I would still just call this a pretty like standard Blurple in a sense, right? It's got like a few of these little like one of 2 ofs, but besides that, it is kind of Blurple through and through. So we don't need to speak about Blurple as a whole too much, but I would like to, I think the focus of this episode is kind of going to keep revolving around Ruby Amethyst and its position within the meta. How do you guys feel Ruby Amethyst does into something like this? I'll start with you, Zach, if that's okay.
Sure. I think this specific list, Ruby Amethyst, would do really well into. It got first place is good, but I don't personally agree with the list. I think it's missing a lot of the stuff you need, like the hypnotic strengths or some kind of action. Basically, it's like what I said with the Amethyst still. I feel like this is a set 9 list that just hasn't caught up yet. I like having 1 to 2 Tamato as if you're playing the 4 guidebook, so I think that's good. I just think you're missing like hypnotic strengths and Demonas or some of the more the set 10 stuff. So Yeah, I don't know the matchup specifically. I haven't tested it a lot. In theory, this does a lot of the same stuff, but a turn faster. But I think you just need to. I think you need like hypnotic strengths and demonas and some more updated stuff.
I think the point you make though is just really good because like saying that these are kind of outdated lists, like it sounds weird, but it's actually like to me it makes so much sense. And it's like what we talked about with like purple steel of like, we talk about how good the deck is. It's like consistent across multiple rounds, but like it's the idea of like people know this deck was good before, so surely the deck does good now. And like saying like I do agree with you. It's like yes, this came first and that's amazing, but I will say for this particular event, I don't know what the breakdown was like for like red purple. I can't imagine there's going to be a bunch of red purple in this event, and because of that, I can imagine this is why this deck did pretty well. So I think we're in this stage where a lot of people are going to start to discover red purple, and a lot of these decks, as you say, are going to have to adapt. So some of these decks that we're seeing, you've got this core shell, and with a couple of those changes that you mentioned, Zach, right? Like a lot of these things probably won't change, but like it's important to try and have the hypnotic strengths and try and think about what are the decks you're going to be facing now that something like Ruby Amethyst is on the rise. I'll pass it to you, Thiago. Oh no, go ahead, Zach. You're good.
So, I mean, I hope no one's taking this the wrong way, that I'm saying, like, your deck list that is bad or whatever. Just that, yeah, I don't necessarily agree with a lot of the stuff. I just remember in one of our past episodes, someone commented about their deck, and I don't want anyone to take it the wrong way. It's just an opinion. Just say I think about it.
Makes perfect sense, man. Like, I agree, but also, like, you like it's still like huge props to this guy for doing so well in the tournament,
Absolutely.
right? Like regardless, it's like still incredibly impressive. But when we evaluate these things, we are trying to just speak in the context of the meta. So when we
and we're not saying we're right.
Exactly. No. This is just our opinion, right? Like, and we're not like criticizing in any sense, right? This is like what we think the direction the meta is going, and these are some of the changes we might make, right? So, but I think that's a better way to do this and to evaluate it rather than saying like, yeah, this is like, because if not, we're just saying, yeah, this is a good deck for like probably the event he played. It probably was a great deck for the event he played, right? But like as things change, it's like people want to know how the decks might potentially adapt. But yeah, I'm gonna move on to the next deck because we've got a lot of lists to get through this episode. This is a second place list from. I'm actually just looking at this list. Second place list from the French tournament. Is this just Ed's deck from LCCC? It just is, right?
Yeah, it's the exact 60. Yep.
it's just Ed's list. Yeah, I mean the cool thing, right? Like you just spoke, Thiago, that these green decks haven't been performing extremely well. Like getting to kind of like top cuts and stuff. So when I say green decks, I more so mean green blue rather than dogs, because dogs has been kind of converting pretty well. But in general, just for a 114 player tournament, it's very impressive to see green blue do this well. It's actually something we talked about when the green blue deck won the very first set 10 CCQ. It was a big moment for the deck in my opinion, because it's never really had the true spotlight this deck has taken down an entire event. People's always known it's like a consistent deck. It's a good deck, but it was never performing. It never had the same numbers of like how many events did Purple Steel win versus how many events did like a green blue deck win, right? So I think it's just good to see that this can really stand its ground, and I'm curious to see how maybe these decks might kind of adapt with trying to tackle the red purple matchup potentially. Like it's funny. I think maybe some decks might not have too many tools to adapt, but it's easy for me to say that. Like you can get really deep into it and you can get really inside a meta and try to say, like including a lower count of these and a higher count of these makes a lot of sense. So I'm really excited to see how a lot of these other decks will change over time. But since we discussed this deck last week, I'm gonna just move on. So there's an Amethyst Steel deck here, which there's a couple of different things I want to talk about. Obviously, the first thing that people's eye gets drawn to here is the Sword of Hercules, right? Which is the deity banisher, right? So if people are playing a lot of these 5-cost Hercules, it's a nice target for that. Obviously, in a lot of the blue decks, you've got the bigger Hercules. Even in the Ruby decks, right? This is actually another thing you've got the. I'm pretty sure that Hercules is a deity, right? The Ruby legendary one. I'm pretty sure he is. I mean, we don't know.
I don't know.
I imagine he is, right?
It
Like,
is, yeah, it is, yeah.
I'm not gonna say this is the reason why they're specifically putting this in just for the Ruby, but it's interesting to think about, right? That could be a potential other target for it. So that's one of the things. The other thing you probably notice is one dock in this list. Thiago, I'm very curious. What do you think about one dock in this Amethyst Steel?
Yeah, I mean, I think one dock's completely reasonable. I think the dock is a card that's like super, super strong, obviously, but it's really bad in multiples. But the first copy of dock in your deck, which is like mathematically impossible to draw a second copy with if you only have one, and so you can never have double dock in your hand, is like super, super strong. So I think like it makes way more sense to play one than to play zero. And this player is playing 4 copies of Hades and 4 copies of Demona, so they're really trying to change their card draw engine. I just think like since something that like Sky touched on a little bit when we were talking about red purple is that Hades and Demona just don't synergize super well with each other. Like you want to play Demona with one card in hand going into your 5th turn so that you can just ink the card you draw, play your 5, drop, and then the next turn ink the card you draw, play your Demona or something of the sort. And the Hades drawing you cards is like pretty counterintuitive to like how you want to play with your Demona, particularly since Demona is incredibly more stronger on the 6th turn than it is on the 7th turn. By giving them one extra turn with 6 ink themselves, they're able to unload their hand by a good bit more than they were able to the previous turn, right? In the first 5 turns of the game, they have 15 ink or whatever, and then on the 6th turn, they get another 6 ink. So it's like more than a third of their ink that they've had access to that game, right? So they're able to unload their hand a lot more, and then your Demona is much weaker in the sense that you're more frequently drawing them a lot of cards, and so you lose a lot of the advantage you could be getting from that card. So by delaying it just a single turn with your Hades drawing you 2 cards on the 5th turn is something that I'm not super interested in doing. So that's kind of typically why we don't see like these cards in 4-ofs together. But I think this deck is doing a couple interesting things. Like I think the 4-cost Demona is a card that we saw picking up some steam last week. It kind of plays a similar role to the Thiago, except it doesn't really they have benefits and downsides, right? It doesn't fight the evasives, but then it doesn't get popped by things like Hypnotic Strength and whatever. And by playing this like sort of bigger strategy with these Demonophores and Dumbos and Hadeses, you're able to play 3 copies of He Hurled His Thunderbolt, which is really good if you're expecting so much Amethyst. Like if these tournaments are going to end up being 30% Amethyst Steel and 20% Ruby Amethyst, like you kind of want a lot of access to a card like He Hurled His Thunderbolt. It's kind of not my favorite direction to take this deck. I think that the He Herald's Thunderbolt is really poor against the big blue strategies, and I think it's really poor against a lot of the faster green strategies that are playing Ursula Deceiver. And I think that a card like Hades is like generally quite poor going first, or excuse me, going second with this deck, and really is only excellent when you go first and are able to snowball like drawing some of these songs with these singers already established. Like if you just think about Hades as like a glorified Finders Keepers, where instead of drawing 3 cards, it's drawing you 2 cards and giving you a medium-sized body, then like nobody would ever think about in a purple tempo mirror where you're playing like purple steel into red purple or red purple into purple steel. You're like, oh, on the draw this game, I'll just play Finders Keepers on turn 5.
Yeah.
And so like that's kind of what it feels like slamming Hades is on turn 5. And it's like you can pray to like hopefully get a 4-cost song to then sing, but then it's like sort of neutral to just like playing something that like would have challenged the next turn. And so I think that by using your uninkable slots on something like He Herald's Thunderbolt and playing these bigger card draw engines instead of just playing something like 1 or 2 extra copies of Doc, you end up making yourself like much stronger on the play and much worse on the draw. Whereas a card like Doc allowing you to multi-spell on like the 5th or 6th turn of the game is sometimes enough to kind of break the balance of you having to go second.
One other card I'd like to hear your thoughts on. It's not included within this deck, but I think we saw Bradley play 1 copy of it in the LCCC, which is, I think it's like Demona's Book, right? Where whenever you exert an opposing character, you gain a lore, but also all of your Demona characters have Rush. So I think there was one turn I saw where he played like, he had like the 4-cost Demona, gave it Rush, got like a really good tempo swing off of it. I think if I'm not mistaken, it's a 3 cost inkable card. I kind of like that as a one of. Curious to hear your thoughts. Again, sorry, Thiago, just because I know you play this deck like a bunch.
Yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting inclusion. I know it's a card that some Blurple players have been trying out because their deck just more naturally wants to play this 4 cost Demona. It's not something I've tried too much. I know it's something that like when people were first experimenting with it, they were like slamming 4 copies of it, and I think it makes way more sense like in the way Bradley used it, where you're just playing a single copy, and like if it's kind of you look at your hand and you can kind of make the judgment of like, am I gonna get enough out of this to utilize it? I think you really do need to be giving Demona's Rush to really benefit the most from it. But the Demonas are kind of awkward rush characters because it's like when you're playing them out, if your turn 3 was to play this book, then you didn't develop a 3 cost singer, and then on turn 4, when you play the 4 cost Demona with Rush, you can't sing a song to unload your hand size by 1 more, and so then when you're on the draw, then she's like stone by daying herself, and then the big Demona, you draw 3 cards, and then if she's rushing in, then she's exerted, and then she stone by days herself. So they're kind of slightly awkward, but I think when you're only playing 1 copy of something like this, and you have 6 copies of the Demonas, you can kind of figure out your game plan around it to kind of determine if it's going to be something that is going to get you enough of an advantage that it's better to play it than to ink it. I probably would not play it myself. I think it's like a little bit gimmicky, but I definitely understand the value in playing a single copy. Yeah.
Cool. All right. The next deck. Sorry, I know we just had Thiago speaking for like the past 5 minutes, but I'll pass this to Sky first because I know Thiago obviously will have a lot to say. How much experience do you have against this deck, and maybe just like what are your thoughts? Did you happen to watch the game between Thiago and DKP? It's actually interesting because it was blue steel.
No,
right?
I didn't. I got the cliff notes of it. But I mean, I think this deck is fine. I think the green purple, the more traditional kind of mid range version of it is really struggling right now in the current meta. So I think if there is a version of green purple that's succeeding, it's probably something crazier like this. Yeah, I think this deck probably beats like blue steel and some of the go bigger strategies. Webby's obviously very nice, and still having like a crazy top end where you can like wipe an opponent's board with the combo, the Prince Philip combo seems very strong. I think you're gonna really just destroy that matchup really bad. I'm not really sure what other matchups it's particularly good into. I'd say red purple probably has a pretty good time with this deck's early game and can kind of just snowball and like at least make you have the exact combo like the first turn that you have it available, which is not a great place to be in. Also stuff like Demona I could see being very disruptive to this style of deck. So I don't know. I personally wouldn't bring this deck to an event. Just looking at it from a view based on what the meta I see currently is, but maybe I'm missing something.
Zach, any thoughts before you pass it over to Thiago?
Yeah, like it's a Sapphire killer, but how are you beating purple still? And I don't know, man.
Yeah,
It's definitely a fine deck for sure. It definitely is. It's not bad. It definitely has the good Sapphire matchups, which is why I brought it for sure.
yeah.
I think. Sorry to steal back
No, you're good. Go
the
ahead.
spotlight here, but I guess looking at this, why would I play this over green blue? I think Ed's list of green blue is actually very good. It turns out Mother Knows Best right now is just a super good card that like traditionally has been like, yeah, it puts them off tempo 1 turn, but if you look at what decks currently want to do and like the strongest decks, like purple steel, and red purple and blue steel are like all very okay. I want to play 1 character on curve and let that give me max value. Mother Knows Best bouncing a card back makes it very tough for them to like effectively double spell with like 2 big things. Like they're probably just gonna have to replay whatever they played, and at best they can play like a 1 or a 2 cost because they're like 1 ink higher. And stuff like red purple or blue steel especially is can't always even do that. So they're just playing 1 thing per turn. So like taking them off tempo by 1 turn with Mother Knows Best is actually super strong. And I think the blue green deck just does that a little bit better and has like a better matchup spread than this list. But
Yep.
There's definitely lines where you can beat purple still. Like you can blow them out with the Cusco shift plus Sing and stuff. Like yeah, it's definitely possible. But and the Prince Philip having ward is big. It's possible. So we'll see.
Why did you decide to bring this deck, Thiago? Did you expect people to just be like giga greedy and like less on like the more like Amethyst focused decks?
Yeah, so I think this deck has like a super, super polarized matchup spread where it destroys some certain decks very, very hard, and it can struggle into other decks extremely hard. And for specifically the LCCC, which is a 16-person closed tournament where you know all 16 players that are participating in it, um, I thought that it was extremely well positioned to be able to take advantage of the kinds of decks that people would be trying to play.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of the downsides that the deck has would be minimized by the fact that a lot of the players in the tournament would kind of skew towards some of the strategies that this deck preys upon. I thought that there was certainly a possibility that there would be like 3 or 4 very fast decks that this deck would not do super well into. That's why last episode I said the scariest player in the tournament's Spessy. I was like, I think he's gonna play some like purple steel location hyper aggro deck. I think he played some like green purple burn deck or
Yeah.
something, which is
Yeah.
like equally miserable for me. But like I think the metagame ended up being like somewhat similar to what I had imagined it would be in this tournament, where a lot of players are playing some of these slow Sapphire strategies. I know there's like Blurple, there's like at least 3 blue steels, there's a green blue, and so I also noted that I know some of the French players have been working on like some of these slower style purple steel decks, which we ended up seeing Minato end up submitting. And I thought that a couple players could have been on those strategies, and I think those strategies don't do super well into this kind of deck. I think it's able to really punish them for taking a more slow approach. And so I thought ultimately, if the tournament ended up being somewhat similar to what I had predicted it would look like, this deck would really, really prey on some of the submissions that people brought. And I think that that's what ultimately happened in the first round. Was like I didn't think I played my game particularly well. Like I wish I had prepared more in terms of just like getting used to playing webcam games or whatever. Like that's like something that I was a bit disappointed in myself. Like I just like went in, I was like, oh, it'll just be like a normal match. And like every time you play in a new way, like you should it takes a couple of games to get used to it. And so that's something that I wish I had done in the first week, was just like practiced a little bit more in that specific setting, because I just felt like I couldn't be super focused. But I'm happy with the result of the match, of course, getting the win. And I think that, and now I know like make sure I focus on that kind of thing moving forward, just so I'm able to just play my best game. So
Yeah, I mean it's definitely different, like playing with like an open hand as well, because you want to entertain the viewers and stuff. I mean, nobody was as bad as me, where I'm pretty sure I had the most jank setup ever. Where I think they didn't even catch it on stream, Sky. But do you remember my whole camera like just fell down like during?
Yeah, that was great. That was hilarious. It was
So
a little entertainment for the viewers.
yeah,
I got
yeah.
I got all this duct tape sitting on my desk that I was like duct taping my camera to the wall
No,
for the
dude.
match and
Bro,
No.
stuff.
that's
So
that's
yeah.
genius. Why didn't
Dude,
I do
I do the
that?
same thing.
Oh my god, you guys are geniuses. I'll have to do that. I was saying, like, I know we're gonna be drawing round 2 soon. I don't know when I'm gonna be able to fit this in. Like, I'll play my webcam game in the airport or something, bro. I don't know. I'm trying to move trying to move home, you know. But we'll make it work regardless. All right, let's take a look at another deck. Speaking of LCCC, this is a deck by Wonderland, aka Luke, and he actually ultimately ended up playing against Bessie. And I think this is a very cool deck. I mean, honestly, equally cool decks against each other. In a way, it depends if you call Spessie's deck cool or just absolutely degen, right? But yeah, this deck wants to take advantage of the Stitch Rockstar, and you got a lot of 1 and 2 cost characters. You want to be able to draw a bunch of characters. I think this deck really utilizes this Mickey Mouse Amber champion as well, playing a bunch of Amber cards. You have the Bodyguard, which is gonna get like a really nice buff from the Mickey. You've even got Goliath in here, which Goliath to me seems like I don't know, like it seems like it would be hard to get all the way up to, but I guess if there's like lanterns and Plutos, you might be able to cheat it out a little bit earlier. Even like 4 copies of Thunderbolt seems maybe a little bit too much to me. I could kind of see it if one of the 2 costs were like Troubadour, maybe, right? That you want to have like some extra sinners. But in general, I think the idea of the deck is like super cool. I do like that as participants in this cool event, that there's always gonna be some players that want to put on a show and show off some cool decks, and I think Luke really did that with this particular build. So I'm going to pass this over to you, Sky, because you did mention that you'd been testing like still a very different deck from this, right? You mentioned like Amber Steel mid-range. But what were your thoughts about this deck? Did Luke share this with you beforehand?
Yeah. Luke Luke has always been a lover of Lantern and Rockstar Stitch, so like those are like I think probably his 2 favorite cards ever, and if they're ever playable at any degree, and if it's a sort of fun format, I think he's gonna try to bring them. So I think this deck is actually like fairly solid. I see the lines that are pretty strong. Like you said, Goliath is kind of hard to play, but it's like a way that you can still draw cards and get value without going Rockstar Stitch. If you go some sort of curve like triple 1-drop into discount a Mickey with Pluto and play that, and then go into a Stitch, I think that's pretty solid. Or you can also go into the Goliath in the same fashion. I think I'm a little bit surprised not to see the Aurora 1-cost. You're playing the 4 of the Elanwi and the 4 of the Mulan. It's kind of a way that you can kind of get a free 1-cost and draw a card immediately. I think it's probably good enough with 12 copies of Princesses with this style of deck. I don't know what you'd cut, though. I think that's probably the reason why you don't see is you still want the filter from Mulan, but I think you could definitely put it in. It'd be pretty solid. Other than that, like I think the deck, when you get the Stitch, it's gonna pop off. Having Mowgli is a super nice tool to have. Like this is a deck that would really want like an Ursula as a 2-cost to trigger Stitch and have that effect. So getting Mowgli is pretty big for this. There's also no board wipe in the format, so like going super wide and just singing songs like Strength and doing single target removal is like pretty good, especially when all of your stuff is like buffed up by the Mickey. So I think the deck is fairly solid.
Yeah. Zach, any thoughts on this build?
Well, I just want to say that it makes me happy to see it because, like Sky was saying, Luke has like been the biggest lover of Lantern and Rockstar Stitch since set 1, and we're in set 10 now. So it's a really cool callback to the original days. So it's really cool to see.
Awesome, man.
Got the post rotation reset back to set 1.
Back to set 1, man. Yeah. I don't know. I remember the clips of like back when the platform that got removed, that will not be named. Like I remember seeing a clip where people like put their entire deck out onto the board with like Rockstar Stitch is such a cool card where it's just like, yeah, draw, play 1-cost, draw, play 1-cost, and you've got like a bajillion characters on the board. I think it's a little bit of a shame that we just don't have any better target than just like this 2-cost Stitch at the moment. I think if you have like, give us a Stitch that's like even semi decent, right? Like give us something that like maybe might take it there. And I think Luke would be licking his lips to play this deck even more.
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't reprint the 1-cost Stitch. That was a really big show. Like when they reprinted Rockstar, and then I was like, oh, they reprinted 1-cost, right? They're like, no, we have 2-cost Stitch. I was like, what? Like it's not that good. Like why are we like not reprinting the 1-cost?
I'm sure we've got some other Stitches. I mean, we know it's Winterspell next set is a Stitch themed set, so maybe Luke's like, right, day 1, another Rockstar Stitch deck. Let's go.
The Rockstar investment's gonna pay off.
Yeah. All right. There is another Amethyst Steel deck I wanted to take a quick look at here. We don't have to spend too much time on it, but I just wanted to mention one card that was in here. This did win an 84-player event in Poland. What are your thoughts on this Steel champion, Thiago, the Pluto? It's a 5-cost sinkable 5/5 for those who don't know. And during your turn, basically you give all of your other Steel characters like the Calhoun effect, I believe. And then whenever you play another Steel character, I guess you can banish an item, which like I guess maybe. But it's more so for the Calhoun effect, right?
It's a card that I played a little bit of, mostly closer to the release of the set. It's definitely not a card I play anymore. I was like playing these decks that were trying to really play into it, where you're playing 4 copies of it, and then you're really trying to utilize the effect where as kind of like a sort of burn spell, where like the Calhoun is just really good because you play her out along with other cards throughout the mid game, and then she ends up just like helping control the board while you burn them a little bit. And so I thought the Pluto could help with that. I actually think in this deck, where it's a one of, it's just like it can do that and it's good, and then it also gives you the added benefit of like being able to destroy like Emerald Chromacons, which is something that like I've seen. It always frustrates me when you see discussions like, oh, is it time for Purple Steel to start playing Benja? Like, no, it's not. It's never time for Purple Steel to start playing Benja. But if you really, really are scared of that kind of thing, you can play the Pluto Steel Champion and it destroys item. But I think ultimately, like those decks, like the matchups where they play items you need to destroy, like you're typically very favored into those kinds of decks with the style of deck. But removing the one of random Pluto, I think that this is like very, very close to something that I would be looking to play. I think it's doing a lot of things I like. I think you want to play a lot of these 3-cost characters that have 4 health, and this deck is playing 13 of them, or the Tinkerbell doesn't literally have 4 health, but you want these characters that when you're playing in the mirror match, they can sing Strength of Raging Fire and be exerted and not be dead to a Captain Hook or Calhoun or Rafiki or maybe a Tinkerbell from Red Purple. You need these characters that are exerting on the 3rd turn with 4 health, because those characters are really, really difficult to deal with. I see a lot of Purple Steel decks that are playing like 4 Giant Cobra and then 4 either Lexington or Cat and then 4 the White Rose. And I think that those decks will just like typically have a lot less consistency into the mirror, because if you only have 8 characters that are able to sing Strength of Raging Fire while being protected from the 3 attack characters from the opponent's side, you're kind of letting them sneak back some tempo into the game where they're able to get a favorable ink trade where they're trading a 1 or 2 cost character for your 3 cost character. So it's mitigating the giant ink advantage that you singing Strength of Raging Fire on their 3 or 4 cost character gave you. So this deck is playing 13 of those characters that are allowed to do that in the mirror, which is going to be maybe the most prevalent matchup in the meta right now. And then, yeah, this 2 Doc, 3 Hades, 2 Demona splits, like somewhat common. It's not like anything that we haven't seen before. Yeah, this deck's kind of playing a lot of 2-drops, but other than that, it's like pretty similar to something I would try to play.
Sure. So that is kind of 10, but I did want to mention Blue Steel because it's a deck that we didn't highlight, and it's something, since myself and Sky played the deck, I'd like to share our thoughts on the deck currently. So what I will say is myself and Sky basically played the exact same deck, except we just swapped our 1-cost ratios around. So Sky was on 2 Hook and 4 Mulan, and I was on 4 Hook and 2 Mulan. Yeah, Sky, I'll pass this to you. You mentioned like the 6-cost Aerial, being like a really, really good card within this deck, and I have to agree. I think it seems to be a much better card to play within the current meta, especially if we're going, if we're going to start to see a lot more Ruby Amethyst, and even against Amethyst Steel, it can help out quite a lot. There's 1 or 2 things that myself, and I have to give a big shout out to Kim, we've been exploring. I won't spoil the details because Kim has the CCQ coming up, and she I mean, listen, it's not anything crazy that she's like, oh my god, I've cracked the meta, but she's trying some stuff that I think actually tackles this, I will say, amethyst meta in theory kind of well, but it's I don't know, it's a little bit interesting. But yeah, the main focus is we both agree that we want to be shifting towards the aerial build. I know DKP played the aerial build against you, Thiago. So I guess if we take this as a baseline, Sky, you can maybe speak about the aerial a little bit and what cards you feel like need to be cut to be put in her place, and then also just the importance of the 1-cost cards within this deck as well. It's something we spoke about during our post-game interview, but I'd love to get it on the podcast if possible.
Yeah, Ariel was a card that I forgot was a princess when I first started thinking about Blue Steel this set, and I was like, when I found out it was a princess, I was like, oh, okay, that probably makes sense to put that in the deck. Like a 6-cost, which is what you're gonna be after Cindy. Being a princess and having like a really big upside if it lives and being super hard to take out is crazy. Like it makes perfect sense in this deck. I think it also does a few more things. One, it rewards the Horseman a little bit more, even though you're probably cutting some copies to play a card like Ariel, because you have more songs. It feels good to play them. I've even gone up to like 3-1 jump just because like it's an extra song and it just helps a little bit get more ramp. And like there are lines with like, singing ramp puts you in a spot with one extra ink and you get to do stuff with it. It's also another card that you can hit off of Sing with Cindy and then go into Goliath, and like it guarantees that you get an extra draw, which is nice. But like what it sets you up for, like triggering Cindy and going to 7 or 8 ink, is you can play a 6 cost and then sing a song with either Cindy or Ariel. It doesn't matter if the Cindy dies, and then you can trigger the Ariel right away, which is super good. If you play like a Tinkerbell and trigger it, you can Genie. Even if you play something like Goliath and sing a song the next turn, like if you ink a card, play Goliath and then sing a song, you're probably down to 1 card. You're getting a card draw off that, and you've removed 2 things. That's incredibly strong. Like the stuff you can do with it is very, very strong. You can also do stuff like following up a Cinderella plus Ariel is like an Amari plus a song and trigger, and you get a Cindy trigger off that, and you have an Amari established that can start filtering cards. Like it fits super well with what the deck wants to do. I think it's a better game plan overall than going like all in on just haymakers after that turn. There are still games where going Goliath on turn 4, going first and singing a song with Cindy is still better because your opponent's probably gonna have to discard 2 cards. But it's really nice to have an option that feels nearly as good or sometimes even better in certain matchups. And Purple Steel is so prevalent now, and people are like picking it as like their go-to deck right now. So having a card that cannot die to strength in that matchup is so crazy, because Namari and Tink are great, but if you're going second and they just have 5 characters in strength, it feels bad. They can't do that at all with Ariel. They're gonna have to take out your Cindy, and that means your Ariel is for sure gonna to live. So the card is crazy with the deck.
Sure, yeah, and like you mentioned, you're probably going lower on horseman size, probably cutting a couple of 1-drops.
Yeah, it feels weird going more into song synergy and cutting horseman, but there's just not that many slots. I think Vision's a card that I've also cut down on.
Interesting.
To make room. Vision's like, it can be good, and I almost like want to try it more with Ariel because it can fish for the songs for her, and like there's a turn where you don't need all your ink, but I think you need to make room somewhere. So
I know why you're lower, bro. It's post game, like, bro, this card sucks. I played 3 of these and got no good cards.
It's like, dude, I paid Vision on 7 ink and the only target was Namari. That's not feeling good.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's basically it for this episode. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun talking through the different decks, and yeah, excited to see what decks come out of DLC Singapore, out of some of the CCQs this weekend, and I'm really excited to see what direction Red Purple starts to move in as well. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all we have time for this week. I had something I wanted to mention at the end of this episode. There's something I've been seeing in the comments recently, which is actually really nice to see, and honestly, things have just been a bit crazy for me lately that I haven't had a chance to really acknowledge it, but I do want to mention it. A lot of people really liked when we used to do the spilled ink section, which is answering people's comments and questions and stuff like that. I know we used to gather a couple of different questions. I'm not saying that's not what we're going to do now, but we've just been really focused. I mean, I've been focusing on restructuring the podcast, getting these guys on board, building a chemistry. I think the past few episodes, it's like all of us being, okay, like how do we structure this? What's the flow like, etc. But I think we definitely have time for a couple of spilled ink stuff. So I think I might start it off by, from next week onwards, whatever maybe the top liked comment is, I think that would be a good way to do it. Like top liked comment, we can discuss it during the podcast, and if we I mean, we all look at the comments anyways, right? If we see any other stuff, we can bring it up as well, because it was a really nice thing I liked from the community, and I'm a little bit sad that I've stopped doing it, and it's just been a great way to interact with all of you guys. And oftentimes there'd be weeks where myself and Moyen would come on and say, man, I feel like we've got nothing to talk about this week, and we'd like spend 40 minutes talking through like one comment somebody made in Spilled Ink, and it was like the highlight of the podcast. It was like the best thing that could have happened, like, so I definitely want to bring that back as well. But yeah, Thiago, I want to pass it to you before we finish up here. Tell us how you're feeling about your trip to DLC Singapore. You're going a long way to play some Lorcana, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super excited. It's like the final real huge event of the year. Like, there's no it's the last DLC. There's not going to be any tournaments until like the start of January, which for me feels like a lifetime from now, even though it's just like 6 weeks or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I feel super great about my preparation. I think like this meta, I've been doing super well in practice in the tournaments I've played. Like everything's been feeling super good. So at the end of the day, like it's a card tournament. It's the best of one tournament, but I'm just really proud of the way that I've prepared, and I don't think that I've gone into a tournament feeling like super as prepared and well off as I do for this tournament. So it is what it is. Like if my tournament could be over in 40 minutes, like that's just how a best of one tournament works. But I'm just happy with where I am, and the result is what it is.
Hell yeah, love to hear that, man. Love to hear the confidence in the preparation. I mean, yes, it's like the last major big event, but you're gonna be going to. Are you still gonna go to CCS after?
Yeah, I'll go to CCS. It's just different than the DLC, right? So if I do horribly in the DLC and then I like do well in CCS, like I'll still feel upset, but yeah, it'll wipe some of the salt away for me. But the biggest problem is just that there's not a tournament for a month, so you're just like sitting with that result festering, and it's like coming from a best of one tournament, so it's like it takes a while for you to like rid yourself of that result, in your head. So, but yeah, I'm super excited. Start my trip tomorrow, and then I'm gonna be there for 9. I'm gonna be back home in 9 days, so it's gonna be a whole thing. But
it's a cool journey
yeah,
as well, right? It's like not only the tournament, right? Like you're getting to
for sure.
to go to a really cool part of the world. Yeah, and then after CCS, Guy is finally gonna convince you to actually come to the PPG event as well. I know Thiago. He's like, man,
No
I'm too
way.
tired. I've been traveling all the time.
You gotta get there.
Yeah,
What are you doing?
Sky's gonna bring you, bro.
You gotta,
Yep.
gotta get on Space Mountain with me. Like, what are you doing?
No, it's a Disney trip too. Oh,
Bro,
man.
don't say
All
it's a
right, I'll buy
Disney
my
trip.
Yeah,
ticket.
then.
Kim's gonna be like,
I'll buy
right,
my
Kawa,
ticket.
we're going. Like, she's gonna want to go over just for that.
We'll have a family party over there. It'll be
Hell
all
yeah.
good.
The
Disney
Podcana
World.
family Disney trip. Let's do it. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, if you enjoyed listening to this week's episode of the podcast, the number one thing you can do is leave us a review over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, your local podcast platform. There's a video version available over on youtube.com/@PodcanaPodcast. Hit the subscribe while you're there. Twitters are @Kawatech_CG, @SkyLorcana, @ThiagoXS23, and @ZachBivens1. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.